Hi, and welcome to the MSA Crusaders today. Today we have our guest, Allison. And Allison, you have been caring for someone in the past who is now one of our MSA Angels. Could you tell us who that was and a little bit about him?
Absolutely. My husband Jeff had MSA. He was diagnosed in 2018. Probably had it longer than that though, and he passed away in October 2020. He and I had been married for 34 years and had known each other and started dating at 16, so we very long-term relationship. He was an accountant, a father of two boys. He was the type of person that everybody loved. He was an amazing hugger. And I like to say I shared my husband with the world because you had to. Somebody like that, you just always have to. So,
That's
uh,
so sweet.
yeah, and he was a big sports fan. He loved baseball and football, and I kind of had to like do a sideshow for just a sidestep sports, but that's just part of having a relationship.
Was he a Yankee fan or a Red Sox fan?
He was a Yankee fan. He was a
Good for
Yankee fan.
him.
Oddly enough, he was a Miami Dolphin fan.
Oh no.
Yes, long-term Miami Dolphin fan, which he did not impose upon his children, but
It
if
had to be
Admiral
because of Dan
Marino was there,
Marino.
but
Yeah,
you know,
It had to be Dan Marino because nobody likes the Dolphins outside of Dan Marino, right?
well, he told me he actually liked the Dolphins since he was like 7 years old.
Wow.
And he's been a New York person. He lived in New York all his life, so
Hmm.
No
Good for him.
cowboys, huh? No cowboys.
no Cowboys.
What were his first symptoms, Allison?
When I look back on it, I would say that his very first symptom was probably the REM sleep disorder. We dealt with that for many years. He got to the point where he was swinging, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and turn over because I never wanted him to hit me in the face. Um, and I did address that with his doctor, but they didn't recognize it for what it was. They just, it was just something he was doing. And it slid in from that to his being off balance, um, which came a little bit later, maybe a couple of years after that. So,
The REM disorder, REM sleep disorder, is the precursor. It is the absolute precursor to neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and MSA. And that REM disorder could come up 10 to 20 years before you actually would come down with MSA or Parkinson's. They finally figured that out. So it
yeah,
took a while.
he didn't have it that long. He was a guy that slept like a rock.
Mhm.
He'd go to sleep quickly, and I was very jealous of that because I always had insomnia. So I'm like, why do I have to be the one? But when he started doing that, it was just his legs. I thought it was restless leg syndrome.
Mhm.
Then his hands started moving, and then he started mumbling in his sleep. And that's when I addressed it with our doctor because I'm like, this is not normal for him. But yet the doctor said, well, are you tired? He's like, no. He goes, well, then I can't really do a sleep study if it doesn't make you tired.
It's so funny how stories are similar. I've had restless leg syndrome since I cracked my backpack open in about 2001. And I
Yes.
had to tell myself that what I was doing at nighttime was different than
Mm-hmm.
restless leg syndrome. Like you said, your husband, like it's they're not the same. It's close, but
Right.
it's fascinating how stories blend in with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And mine too. I beat my husband up in my sleep.
Does he punch back, Nancy?
No, he doesn't. Well,
But then,
I'm in a hospital bed now, but when I slept with him, I did do that.
yeah. Oh, he
But
ended up in a hospital bed. Well, an adjustable bed
Hmm.
eventually.
yeah,
Yeah, but it was that those were the first symptoms. He also had ED. That came up pretty early. And anything else he had, he did not tell me about until much later.
wow.
How much do you think honestly, I speaking openly, do you think he hid it to save you the sorrow, or was he hiding it because he was ashamed?
I think it was probably he wanted to protect me rather than anything else because, like, ED is a erectile dysfunction is one of those big things that men struggle, with
Hmm.
embarrassment and all that. And we just had a very open relationship. So I, when he started with that, I'm like, honey, you need to go to the doctor. You need to talk to them about it. And he's like, yeah, I know. And he made an appointment and he did what he had to do. And I think that, he just was not really sharing everything. And maybe he was questioning at first
Mhm.
and wasn't quite sure. Is he
It was
crazy?
in denial, maybe.
Yeah, or denial. I don't know. But I didn't get all the symptoms right away. That's for sure.
When did the term multisystem atrophy come into play?
When did he get diagnosed?
When did you first hear MSA?
Well, he had started to go to a neurologist up in the city adjacent to us. And that neurologist was kind of dumbfounded. That wasn't even on his radar. And then my husband, told me later on that he had been looking up symptoms. And of course, I was doing the same, but I did not get all the symptoms. So I didn't get what he got. And he literally brought it, to the neurologist up here and said, do you think this could be what I have? And the neurologist is like, yeah, that's a possibility. And that's when he sent him to a movement specialist in Albany.
He confirmed it.
Yep. Oh, that was when I went to the movement specialist in Albany. Dr. Adam is his name, and he sat. It's quite a funny story. He sits down. He says, Jeff. He goes, so what's going on? My husband goes, I'm a little off balance. And I looked at him and I looked at the doctor and I'm like, off balance. And I just rattle off anything and everything I could think of that he had. And the doctor's looking at me and he's like, huh. And then, he did the exam. And then once he sat him back down in the chair, he said, how's your sleep? And as my husband says, I sleep fine, because he did. I mean, ultimately, he slept through the night. He wasn't tired or anything. I'm just going like that. So he turns to me and he says, what's going on? And that was kind of the nail in the coffin, if you will, for the diagnosis, because he had, aside from the orthostatic hypotension, he pretty much had your straightforward, anything you hear about for MSAC.
So when did the orthostatic hypotension come in? Was that before he was diagnosed?
Nope, that came later for him.
Okay.
Literally, probably a month and a half before he died, he started really getting the orthostatic hypotension. And it was very pronounced at the point where like, he had to sit down whenever he started feeling dizzy, and so, he wasn't getting that prior to it. So like everybody gets them at different times, right? So everybody's symptoms are, you generally get all the symptoms, but you get them at different times.
Yeah, and orthostatic hypotension is autonomic, which is not Parkinson's. Now, you can have hypertension without actually having MSA, but when you put those symptoms together, it says, hey, it's not Parkinson's, it's autonomic issues. And for the record, how old was Jeffrey when at the time of his passing?
58.
58.
Wow.
Still young, right? Still 58, by the way, is the mean onset age for MSA. Just so everyone knows that 58 is the average time that you're diagnosed. Not that you had a diagnosed with MSA.
Right. He was diagnosed at 56.
Okay.
Right, 2 years prior. So, and I can go back to like 2013.
Wow.
And the only reason I know that is because my husband used to be he had an amazing center of gravity. And he never worried about going up on ladders and things like that. And we had a problem on very top of our roof. I have a second story, 2-story house. And he said to me, I want you to hire somebody. And I said, to go up on the roof on the ladder? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Like, I thought it was really odd. And when he was talking to that guy, he was saying how the year before, when we had gone on our cruise, ever since then, he feels like he still has sea legs. And that was like a year later. And he said the chiropractor was working with him, trying to get him more stable. And I was like, I thought to myself, I've never heard that. Why did he not tell me? But
right.
Symptoms came up that I didn't recognize at first. Like, we were very active. We hiked, we kayaked, we biked. When we would go biking, he would sway into me. Like his bike would drift into me, and I thought, this is a man who's been riding his bike since he was 5. Why is he doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing was, I never said any of that to him. When he started having a shuffling gait, I thought, we used to talk about, like, if you think old, you're going to be old.
Yes.
And walking like that is old. And but I never said any of it, which I think saved our marriage, quite frankly. Because if I had said these things, he would have gotten angry at me, I'm sure. But,
Yeah.
If you could go back and do anything you haven't did before, but always wanted to, what would that be, Alison?
Yeah, knowing what you know now, right? Go back in time.
Oh, I think we do more trips. I think, because once he got diagnosed, I said, let's go, let's travel, let's, we always put off those things because our kids were, young or in college or whatever. I think we would do more activities, if we knew that this was what we were going to be facing.
You touched on it for a second, and I really have to ask, when Jeffrey was diagnosed with MSA, after he or she neurologist says it's MSA, what did they say next? Did they say you need to get your bucket list out? Did they like tell you anything like you don't
No,
have much time type of stuff?
no, the doctor was very vague. Kind of said, this is what he has. I'm pretty sure this is what he has. He says, and I want you to go home and discuss it and then
Mm-hmm.
get back to me. And we went out to a diner for lunch. And he had to go to the bathroom, of course, because he's always went to the bathroom. And by the time he came back, I already looked it up online, and I just looked at him and said, "Oh my God." And he said, "I don't want to talk about it."
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he meant ever. So I struggled with that for a while because I didn't say anything for at least a month and a half. But I'm talking to a therapist, and he's like, I'm like, I feel like I'm keeping this big, gigantic secret. I can't do this, And so I finally broke down one night and said, I need to talk about this. And I started crying. And he's like, we can talk about this. And I'm like, but you said. And he's like, well, I didn't want to talk about it then.
Right.
So, he let us sink it in first,
Mm-hmm.
and then had us come back.
It's interesting. My doctor was very upfront. I mean, we knew what it was too, and on the Zoom call, because since traveling 2.5 hours for what we already know it is,
Yeah. Yeah.
she was like she looked at the Zoom in my eyes and she's like, you know what this is, right? Do you know what this means? And I was like, yeah, I've looked it up. Unfortunately, and that's when she was like, get your bucket list together. So yeah, just curious how your doctor was like, hey, it's MSA,
Mm-hmm.
and go meditate on it yourselves, kind of.
Because my doctor was like, it's MSA, live each day like it's your last,
Mm-hmm.
and don't give up. He said, I was shocked to hear a doctor say, God is always producing miracles. I was like, wow.
Yeah, because I think obviously there are people, I'm not a religious person myself, but, there are doctors out there that obviously have that, religious aspect to their, and
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense. It makes sense for them to say something like that. But yeah, he just kind of like sent us on our way for a little bit, and then we came back to him and talked. And he was very open with us, he was very open and honest. My husband's general practitioner, we'd known him for like 20 years. And he was like, he wasn't shocked when he heard it. He had already known somebody who had it, so it wasn't a surprise to him. And he actually said to us, like we were talking about, end of life directives. And he was very frank with us. He's like, look, if it were me, this is what I would do. And he said, I would have a, DNR. No question. He said, but you got to do what you got to do. You got to make that decision.
So Alison, you mentioned just a second ago about end of life, like the DNR, do not resuscitate. How did you guys approach those discussions? Was it just random, or like, hey, I got this disease, we need to talk about it? Because you said, there's a month and a half where you really didn't touch on it.
Yeah.
But how did those discussions come about?
So we talked about it a lot. I mean, we were very open about all of it. We knew, what we were like looking at.
Hmm.
And I was like, you need to we need to take care of all these things. We need to go to a lawyer. We need to, get the power of attorney. We need to get the healthcare proxy. We need to get your most, which is where you say your end of life choices are, the pink sheet, if you.
Hmm.
And he totally agreed. And, we made an appointment with a lawyer and we sat down. This guy was great and he was very frank with us and we got all the paperwork together for that. And, we talked about the house and when to put it in my name and, who's going to be responsible other than me, which, was my children. They're adults, but that's when, we talked very frankly about all of it. Which I'm grateful that I had a spouse that was willing to do that. Once we got past the I'm not going to talk about it at all thing,
Right.
and then we were able to talk about, like, he didn't want to he never wanted to go on Facebook and connect with other people. He didn't want to
Hmm.
support group. He didn't want a therapist, but he didn't care that I did it, and he didn't have any problem with me bringing back, these people tried this or that. Let's try it. He was always willing to experiment with whatever. We did essential oils, we did acupuncture, craniosacral therapy, massage therapy, just a whole array of stuff, which
Hmm.
so many people do. And some of it is helpful, symptomatically.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's just not that it's just for the disease slow it or stop it, but it
Right.
helps helping him cope with
Yeah.
what's going on, right? The
Yeah.
symptoms. Speaking of coping, losing a loved one over time is very different than losing somebody, spontaneously, randomly.
Yep.
Obviously, still from MSA that we're talking about here. How did you cope with a sudden loss? I mean, we knew what the end result was going to be, but that wasn't supposed to be in 2 years, and especially not random. So, how did you cope, and were there any resources after the fact that helped you to cope?
Well, to be honest with you, having a therapist right at the very beginning um, helped me to cope along the way. I recognized very quickly that everybody was coming to me instead of him. How's he doing? What are his symptoms? All those things. And I realized if I don't talk to somebody, I'm going to crack. So I got a therapist probably 2 months after he was diagnosed and have had one ever since. And one of the things I did all along the way was what I deemed micro grieving. I grieved every loss with him. When he was struggling to walk and had to use a cane, that was a loss. When he had to move to the walker, that was a loss. As his speech started to go, that was a loss. They were all small losses that we grieved together without really talking about it. But I mean, I know he was in a grieving process too. And I grieved all those. And I think by the time he passed away, I had done a lot more grieving than I even realized. And so I could look at his death literally the next day and say that it was a blessing because he died suddenly. He did not have to be, he never even had a catheter. We hadn't even gotten there yet. We were on our way to that. We were on our way to him going into a wheelchair. Literally weeks before, he had said, I think I need a wheelchair in the house. And, none of that happened. And he didn't get bedridden, none of that. And that's a blessing.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because it's unfortunately in life it's not always about us or me.
No,
It's about you, right? And not that anybody wishes death on anybody, but there are some diseases out here and things that happen that it might be for the best for certain people, right?
yeah. When you get to a point, yeah.
Right.
Um, it's
I
the
have
life,
to agree.
the life that he was leading was very, very insulated. Yeah, insulated. You know, and
We
especially from COVID, it was even worse.
Hmm.
we become we become introverts.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you yourself, with your husband's condition, were you? So I'm a realist.
Hmm.
I'm not an idealist. I'm not an optimist. I'm not. I'm not being optimistic for something that I could see and like, no, that's not it.
Right.
With this disease, were you? How were you as far as like, oh, we're going to beat this. We're going to find a way. We're going to, there's a cure around the corner. How
I
how like that were you, or did you look at the facts in the medical books and be like, well, we're not going to beat this, and this is what's going to happen. So let's plan for the future. Like which ones of those were you?
both.
Yeah.
I'm very pragmatic as a person in general.
Hmm.
So facing the fact that, this was a fatal disease, I always had that as in the back of my mind. And in the beginning, it was, let's see what we can do. Like I said, I tried all kinds of things. He was willing to, just, if nothing else, he placated to me.
Hmm.
Right. Sure, honey, let's do the auction of
Sounds like a
essential.
husband. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, whatever. And then and my friends and my family were like, I heard about this. Have you ever
Hmm.
tried this?
Yeah.
Because everybody wanted him to be well.
Yeah.
Um, but after a while, you just kind of like, okay, this is going to happen whenever it's going to happen. And I wanted to do I came to that point where I'm like, honey, we need to live while we're alive, and we need to enjoy ourselves while we're alive. And we went to Ireland first. We went to DC, and then my son got married in New Zealand. So we did three weeks in New Zealand, which was wonderful, but wonderful and awful at the same time, because I came home with a lot of anger, because that was when I first realized what caregiving was going to be about, because that's when I really had to help him a lot. Um,
And you accepted it. You both accepted it.
well, that's when I switched therapists, because I felt I had this gigantic ball of anger that I couldn't throw at my husband, and I wanted to throw it at something or someone, right?
Hmm.
And I didn't feel like he helped me with that. So that's when I went seeking somebody else. And I kind of worked through that myself while I was looking for a therapist. But I wanted us to do as much as we could for as long as we could. We were planning to go on a Mediterranean cruise in April of COVID year. And that is exactly the first, when it hit, when COVID hit Spain, which is one of the places we want to go. I'm like, honey, you can't go. We
Hmm.
cannot go. You cannot get this disease. You're too vulnerable. And so that went out the window. And then our first granddaughter was born in July of 2020. And she was born in New Zealand. They shut the country down, and we had plans to go for 3 months, 3 months to visit. And that got shot out of the window. And I begged the country a couple of times. I said, his disease is not something that they would have to deal with medically,
Hmm.
but this is a very small window of time before he won't be able to travel anymore. And all we don't want to be tourists. We just want to go see our granddaughter.
Right.
And while I was upset that they said no, I also understood it from the perspective of COVID. And, I appreciated what she did, because it kept my
Him
family,
alive longer.
it kept him alive long. Well, it kept my children safe, my oldest and his wife, and my granddaughter. I don't know if it kept him alive longer.
My daughter keeps telling me, "You do not want to get COVID. I do not think you'll make it through."
Yeah, but he never. I mean, it was weird. That whole time was weird, because like I had to go out and go grocery shopping for him. I was dealing with my mother with dementia. I had to go shopping for her. I took care of her a couple days a week.
Hmm.
And, we didn't know how bad COVID was. And like my grocery shops were literally, I wheeled everything out and I wiped everything down and put it in the back of the car. I
Yeah.
wouldn't let anything, I stopped hugging him and kissing him.
Hmm.
He literally died without having kissed me since March of 2020 to October of 2020.
Wow. But that's beyond love, though, to do something like
Yeah,
that. I
that'd
don't
You
think
know,
be
you could quantify doing
that'd be
that.
hard.
it was extremely hard, because we were very affectionate people. And
Hmm.
we did hug. So toward the end, he had so much swelling in his ankles and his legs that we went to a lymphedemic physical therapist. And the lymphedema is dealing with the lymphatic system, which is when you get swelling in your ankles and stuff, it's your lymphatic system is not draining properly. And so she showed me how to do massage on him, and she actually prescribed something called Jobst wraps, which I had to put on his legs, and think basically like ace bandages that descend, so they're wider at the top and narrower at the bottom near the ankle.
I'm glad you're talking about this because I'm dealing with this right now.
Yep. And I would suggest going to if you can get to a lymphedemic physical therapist. But these Job's wraps were hard to, you had to learn how to put them on. You can't just buy them and do it, So anyway, so when I went to get him up off the bed, I had to yank him up, and so he'd land on top of me, and I'm like, well, we're here, let's hug. So I did get to hug him toward the end. There was no kissing. But
That's not love though. You know, my kids had COVID. We got it like 3 years later, but my kids had COVID, and at the time they were probably last year, I don't know, 17, 11. My daughters, you're still going to get a kiss. Like, I'm like you. It's one of those things where you never know. Knowing what I know now,
yeah.
I'm in that same ballpark. I was laughing at my mother for wearing a mask all the time because of COVID. COVID, COVID, COVID. I was like, it's just COVID. And like you said, now it's like after I had that kidney infection a couple months ago, I'm like, I don't know if I can live if I live through that. It's bad, right?
Yeah, pretty dangerous. So, and he didn't die of COVID. He died of MSA. He never got COVID.
You spoke about plans. You spoke about Ireland. My daughter went to Ireland. I talked her out of it this year. We went to a Mediterranean cruise and visited Europe too.
Yep.
I said, "There's not so much to do in Ireland. Let's go to Europe. Let's go to Paris." She's like, "Oh yeah." So speaking of Ireland, um, you know, during this fight for 2+ years, what were the best moments you had with you? Now, obviously, we couldn't go through them all because there's undoubtedly there's more to what we're talking about. But what are some of the most cherished memories you have, whether it's fighting together with a disease or going, living,
Mm-hmm.
going, trips, hiking in different places you never would have done before if it wasn't for the diagnosis? What are some moments like that you've had?
Certainly my son's wedding, that he was able to make the wedding, and he was able to a bit more robotically dance. He was still able to dance a little bit, and I
Mhm.
just let him drink as much as he wanted to. He
Good
got
for you.
pretty tipsy, and I did have to walk him into the bathroom, and there's a hilarious story about that. But those were the moments, where we were with family that to me were the most important to hold on to.
Hmm.
Just watching my younger son take him to the Basketball Hall of Fame, just the two of them doing a special trip, and seeing the pictures of that, you can't quantify that by any stretch. And just our quiet moments together, we were
Right.
just sit and laugh. Like my son, 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks before my son or my husband died, my son sent a video of his daughter giggling for the first time. And it was an absolutely hilarious little video. And we literally sat on the couch just hysterically laughing because she just was at that deep belly baby laugh that just, you can't
Right.
not laugh at that. And in the middle of that, he's going, I'm peeing in my pants, because it was just such a great moment.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it was just that was a wonderful moment for me. And I just to those, yeah.
I just would like to know if there's anything else that you would like to share.
I think one of the biggest things I feel really strongly about is, as a caregiver, take time for yourself, even if it's an hour. If you can get somebody to sit with your MSA patient, if you can talk to a therapist, oh my God, like that saved my soul, to being able to just spit everything at her.
Mhm. I got
So
one every week.
yeah, I think, you know, the
The
my
caregiver
husband never
definitely
wanted to
need
talk
one.
to anybody. Pardon me?
So yes, as a caregiver, you definitely need one.
Yeah,
I'm
I
trying to talk my husband into going to get one.
Yeah. It's a way to process when you, like, I never wanted to cry in front of him. I didn't want to bring my emotions to him because I
Hmm.
felt like, he had enough of a burden. He didn't need me.
Right.
And when I told him I was going to get a therapist, he goes, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay." Um, and it came from his brother had come to me. We had a party with all these people, and his brother said to me, "Tell me more about this. Tell me more about this." And he broke down in front of me. And while I couldn't break down that night, the next morning I spent 2 hours doing laundry in the basement, crying and blowing my nose on everything going into the washer. And I just didn't want him to know that I was that upset, and that's when I realized I have to have somebody that I can, spill all
Give
this to
into, yeah.
and just hand it to. So,
I
and
definitely understand that. That is for sure.
it's the best thing ever. And I'm still seeing her. I just saw her 2 days ago.
Well, I
I
know that this is really hard for you today, Allison, and I am sitting here shedding some tears with you.
it's
But I want to thank you so much for coming on MSA Crusaders and sharing this story with us,
You're
and
more than welcome.
with everyone else and using our platform today.
I think it's important to talk about it. I do.
I
And
agree.
talk about it. There's nothing wrong with crying.
Yeah. So it's
I
important to
agree.
cry too. You even as a man, we can only hold this in for so
Yeah,
long before it turns into something else, right?
you
That's
really
I
blow up,
agree.
blow
Yeah.
a gasket.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you so much. It means so much for us to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate being able to, share in this, I don't know what I want to call it. We're all in this boat together. We've all been here.
Takes a
Or,
village, is what I said, David, right? Takes a
Amen. Yeah.
village.
so
Well,
Thank you, Al.
yeah, also we appreciate you very much. We know it's hard. I mean, I'm crying on the inside too, right? This is unfortunately you can't get numb to these things. You gotta keep drawing attention to it and
yeah,
stories and relationships and things like what you had with Jeffrey for so many years. You can't. You know, your marriage sounds just like mine. He sounds just like me. You sound exactly like my wife. I promise you. I'm looking at twins over here. Um, but yeah, we thank you because this. It's only the words of wisdom you have and Jeffrey had that we all have definitely. It's so rare that people can't hear these things very often, right? What I what I should have, could have done, or ought to do.
yeah,
That's what this is all about. Getting some other people not only hope, but also giving other people with MSA and their caregivers and family a sense of direction above all else. There's
Yeah, some
we
yeah.
insights.
yeah
And
we
that's why I
learn from
stay on the
experience.
Facebook pages. Yeah. I mean, I'm still on the Facebook pages. I share my journey with people
Hmm.
when it's appropriate. I don't speak of things like when somebody's asking about bedridden. I'm like, I didn't deal with that. I'm not going to speak of.
Hmm.
But I feel it's important to be still a part of it because it's so rare and we're all over the place. And there's no, one place we can convene and have a support group and a weekly or monthly support group. So Facebook it is.
Well, about
Absolutely.
MSA.org and vote for Marco Gonzalez. The Major League Baseball is going to give us a lot of money for research. And we want Marco Gonzalez because he is going to represent MSA. So,
Is he the one from Seattle?
Seattle, you got it, the Seattle Mariners.
Yep.
We're going to have 10 MSA volunteers that are going to give him a trophy tonight on live
Um,
TV on the MLB or CBS. So watch that and vote for him.
all
Wow.
right. We'll leave it at that. We appreciate you, Alison.